it down.
And welcome in to Coast. I'm David Lloyd. College sports have started front-loading the start of the season. This year in college football, we got number 1 Alabama and number 3 Florida State. Tonight in college hoops on ESPN, it's number 1 versus number 2, Duke and Michigan State, followed by another heavyweight showdown, Kentucky and Kansas in the Champions Classic. We're going to get to that and get to Coach K in just a minute. First, a developing story in college hoops. And it has to do, of course, with UCLA players. The 3 UCLA players accused of shoplifting in China are on a flight back from Shanghai to Los Angeles, expected to land around 5 p.m. local time later today. In a statement, Pac-12 Commissioner Larry Scott said the matter had been resolved to the satisfaction of Chinese authorities. The freshmen, including LiAngelo Ball, had been detained at a Chinese hotel since first being questioned in the investigation last week. President Trump had asked Chinese President Xi Jinping for his help in resolving the case. The rest of the team returned to the U.S. last weekend. Let's bring in our basketball insider on this, Jeff Goodman. Jeff, what can you tell us about the players' future with the program?
The 3 UCLA players are on their way back. Right now they're on a flight back from China. They landed about 5 o'clock local time. And tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, they're going to have a news conference of sorts. There'll be no questions asked or answered there in terms of with the media, but what they will do is the 3 players will read a statement. Then Steve Alford and Dan Guerrero, the athletic director, will also comment, but they will not take questions. And the big question really is, are these players going to be suspended or will they be booted from the program? And also, have the charges been dropped? So some questions will be answered, but they're not going to go into detail tomorrow at this news conference at 11 o'clock.
All right, our basketball insider Jeff Goodman giving us the very latest there as we get the news on these UCLA players returning home. Jeff, they're in Chicago for the Champions Classic tonight.
The Champions Classic is a tremendous tip-off to the season.
You look at the teams that are in it with Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and us, I mean, that's rare air.
And the title has returned to its old Kentucky home.
Playing the level of teams that are in this field, it's the ultimate challenge.
Michigan State has won the national championship.
Mike Krzyzewski, you've had some wars that they've won more of than we have. The best characteristic from each one of them would be a level of maintaining a program.
Duke is back atop college basketball's elite.
Each program has its own culture, and there are a lot of outstanding ones. You learn from being with those guys.
Kansas, they are now your national champions.
We have 3 of the pillars of our profession, and Coach Krzyzewski, Coach Izzo, and Coach Calipari. You know, I steal from everybody. These are 3 that I stole a lot from.
We're lucky to be coaching college basketball. We also know that everyone's not going to win. Yeah, the Holy Grail goes to one.
What a doubleheader at United Center, Champions Classic. Well, let's start with the nightcap. You have the 2 winningest programs in college basketball history facing off. Number 4, Kansas, number 7, Kentucky. The 2 schools have combined for 4,457 wins. A little bit of winning in those programs' history. That game is following the opener. Number 1, Duke. Number 2, Michigan State. Just the 41st time in the AP poll era and 8th time in the last 20 seasons that the number 1 and number 2s will meet. And the Duke head coach, Mike Krzyzewski, joins us now. Mike, if you had to describe your team in 3 adjectives, what would they be?
Young, energetic, easy to coach.
And that's 3 good ones. 4 freshmen starting for the first time in 34 years. You say young. What's the greatest challenge when you coach a young team?
Well, I think not to give them too much so that they lose their instincts. You know, they're all really good basketball players. They have great instincts, and you can overcoach them and put them in a box. Instead, you know, we try to give them a little bit and then see how their instincts react to it. And this is going to be a process as we learn about them individually and collectively. And that's why tonight is such a big game for us. And being in this atmosphere, it's our first, for 7 of these guys, it's their first road trip, first time in this type of an environment against really an outstanding, well-coached team.
Yeah, I thought you might say tall. You got a big team this year. How is your playing style going to look this season compared to maybe years past?
Yeah, we only said 3 adjectives, so I just tried to. No, we are tall, and more importantly, we want to be wide. In other words, to use that length but stretch it this way, not that way. And these guys have good feet, really good lateral movement, and the more and more wide we get to where they talk and use their hands to point and talk and get outside themselves, the better we will be.
Hey, Mike, of course, the guy many people are talking about is Marvin Bagley, who was the #1 recruit in the land. What is the part of his game that you spend the most time on when you're coaching him?
To be quite frank with you, he's an incredible worker and an incredible young man. He wants to be really good. He wants to be on a really good team. So he works on everything, every day, and just a joy, really a joy to work with. And also a joy for the other guys on the team to play with, because he's very unselfish.
Hey, Mike, the 4 freshman starters and, of course, your one senior, Grayson Allen, how would you describe his journey through his career at Duke?
Well, I think a great one, because he's been exposed to both extremes and in the middle, where he never played. Then he was a hero to win a national championship. Then he's an All-American. Then he's hurt his whole junior year and got all this publicity, and people, were down on him, and, really as closely scrutinized as I've ever seen a collegiate player be. And so you grow from all that. The good, the medium, and the bad. And, he's healthy. He's really healthy right now. He's got an amazing attitude and really loves being with these young guys. So he's been really good in the first 2 games, and hopefully he stays healthy. I think he'll have a great year.
Mike, you talked about the negative publicity. We spent a lot of time talking about him and his temper and getting mad and things. How has he changed? How has he channeled his emotions so it doesn't hurt him or the team?
Well, look, do you ever get mad?
Absolutely,
everyone
does.
Angry? Come on.
Yes.
All right. So he's a human being. How does he channel that? How do you channel it? He does. But if you were scrutinized and everyone watched every second of how you played, and then were judging it, it would have a negative impact on anybody. And that was, to me, very unfair. But that's in the past. He's not trying to make up for anything. I told him, just move on. You're 22 years old. Move on. And move on, and he has. And so to really keep talking about the past, I think, is really a little bit useless.
This is the 12th time you and Tom Izzo square off, 2 Hall of Fame coaches. I know you're spending a lot of time working on your team, but did you ever notice what he's like stalking his sideline?
Well, Tom's a great friend, and really one of the great coaches in our game today. And he's built an amazing program at Michigan State. He's done it because he gets his kids to play as one. They play hard, they play smart, and they play together. And that'll be a real challenge for us, because they're older than we are. Their freshmen are now sophomores. They've been through the grind of a Big Ten NCAA season, and they've added a really outstanding freshman in Jackson. This will be a heck of a game for us, and I hope that we learn a lot from it.
2 great coaches, 2 great teams, #1 versus #2 tonight in Chicago. Mike, you turned 70 in February, and I know you told our Jeff Goodman you didn't get your knee replaced to retire. How are you mapping out your future?
One moment at a time. I like to live in now, not was or will. And so I don't have plans for retirement. I have plans for trying to have a great game against Michigan State tonight.
#1 versus #2 tonight in Chicago. Mike Krzyzewski joining us today on Coast to Coast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Watch me, watch me, watch me do this. You see me dancing like I'm Elvis. Look, watch me, watch me, watch me do this. Since 2012 I've been the coolest. If you do not get it, you foolish.
Notre Dame, one of 4 top 10s that went down week 11, leaving just 6 Power 5 teams with 1 or fewer losses. Miami, Alabama, and Wisconsin, the undefeated Power 5 teams. You can't necessarily feel too comfortable if you're in the top 4 of tonight's 3rd CFP rankings. Only 7 of the 12 eventual playoff teams ranked in the top 4 at this point. So where do you need to be after tonight's release? No eventual playoff team ranked lower than 9th in the 3rd college football playoff rankings, so get yourself in the top 9. Paul Feinbaum joins us now to answer the biggest questions facing each Power 5 after Week 11. So number 1, Georgia, number 3, Notre Dame, both losing. How might that impact Oklahoma, Paul, and their chances of getting in?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma moves up considerably. In fact, I think the committee probably won't agree. I think they should be number 2 tonight. After Alabama, who, by the way, should have been number 1 all along. So I think that's how I see it. After that, you can really shake it up. It really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But Oklahoma has just had so many impressive wins. They lost earlier to Iowa State, but don't forget they beat Ohio State. Second week of the season, they beat Oklahoma State. They beat TCU. If the Big 12 had not come up with this conference championship game, they would have already come close to wrapping up a berth in the playoffs, but they'll have to play that because the Big 12 commissioner didn't like being left out. So Oklahoma's in great shape, David.
Yeah, all those wins you mentioned were by double digits, so they really are taking care of business. Let's get to the Big Ten. Wisconsin, it's been there the whole year. We knew before the season they had a somewhat relatively easy schedule. Yeah. They've gone through it. They've beaten everyone that's on the schedule, clinched the Big Ten West, but the selection committee chair, Kirby Hocutt, said last week that the strength of schedule, the worst among the top 25 teams. What did this past weekend mean for the Badgers' fortunes?
I don't think it should mean that much. They'll move up. I mean, I would have them 6th, but I would have them behind a 2-loss Auburn team because you look at Auburn, they went on the road and played Clemson. You think Wisconsin could have navigated Death Valley? I don't think so. So they, to me, still have a lot to do. And, they play Michigan this week. That is an impressive win. They'll ultimately get Ohio State, I would presume. Even then, I don't think they're guaranteed of anything, David. And I know Badger fans are going to go, how can you possibly say it? Well, you have to play quality opponents in the preseason. And Florida Atlantic and BYU, to me, doesn't cut it.
All right. Well, if the Big Ten gets shut out and the Pac-12 gets shut out, you might have 2 teams from a conference. Which conference would you say has the best chance to put 2 in the playoff?
Well, to all my SEC friends, David, I would say the ACC. I think their championship game right now looks to be the very best. Clemson and Miami, that is an epic game. It's a play-in game. And quite frankly, if it's Miami as a narrow loser, it can't be a big margin, you could still